It's not just a topic, it's more like an intellectual adventure, a journey through Western philosophy, but seen through the eyes of, well, a young girl in a truly unique novel.
That's right. We're unpacking Jostein Gaarder's Sophie's World. And it's not just a book, it's really an experience. You sort of step into the shoes of Sophie Emonson, this 14-year-old Norwegian schoolgirl. She starts getting these mysterious anonymous letters.
Right, out of the blue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And these letters, amazingly, start laying out thousands of years of human thought, one really big question after another. So our mission today, kind of like Sophie's own quest, is to dig into this incredible material and pull out the most important nuggets of insight.
And it kicks off with maybe the two biggest questions there are. Who are you and where does the world come from? I mean, these aren't just casual musings, are they? These are the deep down questions that have, driven thinkers for centuries.
Absolutely. And what Sophie's World captures so brilliantly is that philosophy itself, its very root, comes from this profound sense of wonder.
Yeah, that magic trick analogy in the book is perfect.
It really is.
Yeah.
The magician pulling a rabbit out of an empty hat. You're just stunned, asking, how? How is that possible? That feeling, that complete wide-eyed astonishment, that's where philosophy begins.
And the book points out, quite insightfully, I think, that most of us lose that as we get older. We get comfortable, right? We sort of crawl deep into the rabbit's fur, as Gaarder puts it, and just stop being amazed by the trick of existence itself.
Exactly. We take it for granted. But philosophers, and interestingly, young children too, they keep that thin skin, that curiosity. They never quite get used to the sheer bizarre fact that the world is.
It reminds me of Sophie's little thought experiments, like imagining her dad flying around the kitchen. Her little brother, Thomas, he just accepts it. Daddy's flying, no big deal.
Right, he hasn't learned the rules yet.
But her mom, she drops the jam jar, totally freaked out, because she knows dads aren't supposed to fly. She's got that thick skin of expectations, and it makes you think, what about the world just being here, floating in space? Do you ever stop and feel the strangeness of that, or have you gotten too used to it?
And that's the choice, isn't it? For you listening right now, are you going to stay thin-skinned, stay amazed like a child or a philosopher, or just, let the world become ordinary?
This deep dive, well, it's definitely for those who want to keep questioning, who refuse to just shrug off the biggest magic trick of all.
Okay, let's do it. Let's travel back to the beginnings of Western thought, ancient Greece. This is where we really see the first sort of systematic attempts to understand the world using reason, moving beyond just the old myths and stories about gods.
Our first real stop is with the natural philosophers. These thinkers were obsessed with the fundamental question, what is everything made of? What's the basic stuff?
Like the ultimate building blocks. Precisely. Take Empedocles, around the 5th century BC. He proposed that everything in nature comes from 4 fundamental roots: earth, air, fire, and water.
The classic 4 elements.
The very same. But his really clever idea was that these elements themselves are eternal, unchanging. They don't come into being or pass away. It's just that they combine and separate in different ways.
So like mixing paints. The basic colors stay the same, but you can create endless shades by mixing them.
Exactly. So when a flower blooms and then dies, its elements earth, air, fire, water just separate and return to the pool, maybe to combine into something else later. It's constant change on the surface, but underlying permanence. Sophie points out how brilliant this was because it explained change without throwing reason out the window. The basic stuff remained.
That's a huge step, dealing with that whole permanence versus change problem.
A massive step. And then building on that, you get Democritus, maybe around 460 BC. Now, he had this incredibly radical idea, atoms.
Atoms. Back then.
Yeah, tiny, indivisible particles. He thought they were solid, impermeable, and they came in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. Some had little hooks, others had barbs, which allowed them to link together to form everything we see.
The book uses the Lego analogy, which is perfect.
It really is. Lego bricks are indivisible, right? They come in different shapes, they're solid, they have connectors, and you can build anything, take it apart, and build something new. The bricks themselves are eternal.
Unlike clay, which you can just keep dividing forever.
Precisely. Atoms, for Democritus, were the fundamental, unchanging building blocks. And this led him to a completely materialist view. Only atoms and empty space exist. Nothing else. No gods pulling strings, no spirits.
Which means no fate, no destiny.
Exactly. He rejected fatalism. If everything is just atoms moving according to natural laws, then things aren't predestined by some higher power. Sophie really grapples with this, wondering about superstition versus faith. Like, Is getting sick a punishment from the gods? Does praying help? Democritus offered a world without divine intervention, purely natural explanations, a foundation for science, really.
But fatalism, that idea that everything is predestined, was still incredibly strong in Greece, wasn't it? Like the oracle at Delphi.
Oh, absolutely central. People truly believed their fate was sealed. They'd go to Delphi, where Apollo supposedly spoke through the priestess Pythia. She'd go into a trance, mutter things.
And the priests interpreted her cryptic answers.
Right, and these priests were clever. They knew politics, they knew people. Their interpretations were often ambiguous, but profound sounding, always right in a way. And that famous inscription over the temple, "Know thyself."
What did that really mean to them?
It was a reminder, really. Know your limits as a human. Know you're mortal. But also, maybe, know that your destiny is inescapable. Think of Oedipus. The whole tragedy revolves around him trying and failing to escape his terrible fate.
Yet, even with this strong belief in fate, people were starting to look for natural causes, right? Like the early historians.
Yes, exactly. Figures like Herodotus and Thucydides. They started writing history, not just as divine punishments or rewards, but looking for human motivations, political reasons, economic factors behind events. Why did war happen? Not just the gods were angry.
And the same shift happened in medicine with Hippocrates.
Definitely. Hippocrates, around the same time as Democritus, is crucial. He's the founder of Greek medicine. He insisted on finding natural explanations for illness. Sickness wasn't divine punishment, it was an imbalance in the body.
Imbalance of what?
Of the body's humors, essentially. Health was the natural state, achieved through moderation, a healthy lifestyle. You needed harmony, a sound mind and a sound body. The path back to health was restoring that natural balance.
And the Hippocratic Oath, that comes from him.
It does. Those core ethical principles, do no harm, benefit the patient, confidentiality, they all stem from Hippocrates and his school. It was a monumental shift towards understanding the body and health rationally, scientifically.
Okay, so moving from natural causes to human concerns. Socrates, such a fascinating figure, 470 to 399 BC, wrote nothing himself, yet he's arguably one of the most influential philosophers ever.
He truly is, and the book draws these really striking parallels between Socrates and Jesus.
Yeah, I noticed that. Both enigmatic, no written works, masters of conversation, incredibly self-assured, spoke for something greater, challenged authority, and ultimately died for their beliefs, inspiring huge followings. It's quite uncanny.
It really highlights the power of personal conviction and maybe a certain kind of martyrdom in shaping history. Socrates' big project, though, was different. Cicero said he called philosophy down from the sky. He turned away from cosmic questions and focused squarely on human beings, on ethics, society, good and evil.
And his method, the Socratic method, constantly asking questions.
Right. He played the Joker in Athens, as the book puts it, not claiming to know everything like the sophists sometimes did, nor being completely indifferent. His famous claim was knowing only one thing, that he knew nothing.
That's his wisdom, knowing he's ignorant.
Paradoxically, yes. That famous story about the oracle declaring him the wisest, he questioned everyone thought to be wise politicians, poets, and found they thought they knew things they didn't. He, at least, knew his own ignorance. And that drove his constant questioning, his search for real understanding.
So he was a rationalist, believed reason was the key.
Absolutely. He believed true knowledge comes from within, through reason. And his most radical idea, maybe, was, he who knows what good is will do good.
Meaning, if you truly understand what's right, you can't help but do it. Bad actions come from ignorance.
Exactly. Wrongdoing isn't intentional malice, it's a mistake, a lack of true insight. So learning becomes crucial for virtue. This completely contrasted with the sophists who taught rhetoric and argued morality was just convention relative to society. Socrates insisted it was grounded in universal human reason.
It's powerful. Sophie herself connects with it. When her mom comments on her being preoccupied, she just blurts out, "So is Socrates."
He chose how his ideas can resonate even today. Which leads us perfectly to his most famous student, Plato.
Plato, 428 to 348 BC. And the book uses that amazing video lesson to place us right back in Athens around 402 BC. just before Socrates' death. You can almost see the Parthenon being built.
That incredible temple on the Acropolis, designed with those optical illusions, right? No straight lines, yet it looks perfectly balanced.
Yeah, mind-bending. And down below, the Dionysus Theater, where tragedies like Oedipus played out.
Exploring those very themes of fate and human limits we talked about, and comedies too, even ones making fun of Socrates.
Imagine. And then the Agora, the marketplace, the hub of it all, where words like politics, democracy, philosophy were born, and where Socrates would just talk to anyone and everyone.
A truly vibrant scene. And it's out of this context that Plato develops his most famous theory, the theory of forms, or ideas.
Right. His big idea was that the physical world we see, touch, and hear, it's not the real deal. It's somehow less real.
Precisely. Everything tangible, everything in the sensory world is constantly changing, fleeting, like a soap bubble, here one moment, gone the next. So true knowledge, lasting knowledge, can't possibly be based on something so unstable.
So where is true knowledge found?
In the world of ideas or forms. These are eternal, unchanging, perfect patterns or blueprints that exist outside of space and time, accessible only through our reason, not our senses.
Okay, that sounds abstract. How did he explain it?
The gingerbread man analogy is brilliant. Think of a perfect cookie mold that's the eternal, unchanging form of a gingerbread man, the actual cookies you bake. They're imperfect copies. Some might be burnt, broken, lopsided. They exist in the sensory world.
But the mold itself, the idea, is perfect and timeless.
Exactly. Our senses might only show us the imperfect cookies, but our reason can grasp the perfect form, the mold they came from. That's why, Plato argued, all horses share the quality of horseness, even if they look different. They all participate in the eternal idea of the horse.
And the myth of the cave illustrates this journey.
Perfectly. It's probably his most powerful allegory. Imagine prisoners chained in a cave since birth, facing a wall. Behind them, a fire casts shadows of objects onto the wall. For the prisoners, these shadows are reality. It's all they've ever known.
Until one escapes.
Right. He struggles out into the sunlight, sees the real objects, the true world, the sun itself. It's painful, blinding at first, but it's genuine reality. He realizes the shadows were just pale imitations.
And he goes back to tell the others.
He feels compelled to, but they don't believe him. They mock him, point to the shadows, insisting that's what's real, and tragically they end up killing him for trying to shatter their illusions.
Which is clearly about Socrates.
Almost certainly. It's Plato's depiction of the philosopher's difficult journey from the darkness of opinion and sensory illusion towards the light of true knowledge, the forms. And it's a commentary on the resistance, even violence, that such enlightenment can provoke. It's about the struggle to lead people out of ignorance.
Plato also applied this kind of structured thinking to politics, didn't he? His ideal state.
Yes, in the Republic. He saw the ideal state mirroring the structure of the human soul. The soul has three parts: reason, head, will, chest, and appetite, abdomen.
So the state should have corresponding parts.
Exactly. The rulers should be philosophers, governed by reason and wisdom, the head. The auxiliaries or warriors should embody courage and will, the chest. And the laborers, artisans, farmers should practice temperance, managing their appetites, the abdomen. A just society requires each part doing its job harmoniously, led by reason.
And he had some surprisingly modern ideas about women.
He did. Quite radical for his time. He believed women had the same rational capacity as men and could be rulers, could be philosophers, if they received the same education. He even suggested freeing the ruling classes from traditional family structures with communal child rearing so women weren't tied down.
But it also sounds a bit controlling, totalitarian almost.
There are definitely elements we'd question today. No private property or family for the rulers and warriors, state control over education and upbringing. It was a highly rationalized, perhaps overly rigid utopia based purely on reason.
How did Sophie react to all this?
For her, it was like coming out of the cave herself. She felt she saw the world differently, understanding nature as imperfect copies of perfect forms. It was a beautiful thought, this idea of eternal patterns behind the fleeting world. It gave her a new way to appreciate both the permanent and the temporary.
Okay, so after Plato comes his most famous student, Aristotle, 384 to 322 BC. But he didn't just follow Plato's ideas, did he? He disagreed quite strongly on some key points.
He really did. It's fascinating. Aristotle fundamentally disagreed with Plato's core idea of a separate world of forms. He argued that the idea of a horse isn't floating around in some other dimension. It's a concept we form in our minds after observing many actual individual horses in this world.
So experience comes first.
Exactly. Aristotle was an empiricist. His famous principle, nothing exists in consciousness that has not first been experienced by the senses. He thought Plato was unnecessarily doubling the number of things by inventing this whole other world of forms. Why not just study the world we actually live in?
That's a pretty major shift.
Huge. Aristotle was much more grounded, more focused on the natural world. He introduced concepts like potentiality and actuality. Think of a chicken egg. It has the potential to become a chicken. It actualizes that potential as it grows. But crucially, it doesn't have the potential to become, say, a goose. Its inherent form defines its potential.
Form, but not like Plato's separate forms.
No, for Aristotle, the form of something is its inherent characteristics, what makes it what it is, its specific properties and potential. It's in the thing itself, not separate from it.
And he had these 4 causes to explain things.
Yes, another key part of his systematic approach. To truly understand something, you need to know 1, its material cause, what's it made of, example, marble for a statue. 2, its formal cause, what is its essence or form, for example, the shape of the statue. 3, its efficient cause, what produced it, for example, the sculptor. 4, its final cause, what is its purpose or function, for example, to be admired, to honor a god.
So for rain, the material cause is water, the efficient cause is evaporation condensation. What's the final cause?
For Aristotle, the final cause or purpose of rain would be, for example, to nourish plants and help crops grow. He saw purpose, or telos, throughout nature.
He sounds incredibly systematic, like a scientist.
He absolutely was. He was obsessed with classifying everything. He laid the foundations for biology, meticulously categorizing plants and animals into species and genera based on their characteristics and abilities.
Like Sophie's pets, the goldfish, the tortoise.
Exactly. He'd look at what defines them, what they can do.
Yes.
Plants can nourish themselves and grow. Animals can also perceive and move. Humans uniquely can think rationally and categorize. He created these logical hierarchies. He even joked in the book, through Alberto, warning Sophie about encountering a what's-it that defies classification.
Did he have a concept of God?
Yes, but very different from Plato's or later religious views. He spoke of a first mover or unmoved mover. This wasn't a creator god who intervened, but the ultimate final cause, the source of all motion and change in the universe, itself unchanging, drawing everything towards its perfection.
And ethics. What about living a good life?
For Aristotle, happiness eudaimonia wasn't just about pleasure. It was about fulfilling your potential as a human being, living a life of virtue according to reason, using all your capacities, the vegetative soul, growth, the animal soul, sensation, and especially the rational soul, thought to their fullest extent.
No, we have to address his views on women. Not so great, right?
Yeah, definitely not. It's a significant blind spot. He considered women to be essentially incomplete or unfinished men. He thought they were passive in reproduction, merely providing the matter, while the male provided the form and soul. He even believed children inherited only the father's characteristics.
Wow, that's startlingly wrong and a huge contrast to Plato's ideas.
It is. And unfortunately, because Aristotle became so influential, especially in the Middle Ages through figures like Aquinas, this view became deeply entrenched in Western thought for centuries. It's a sobering reminder, as the book notes, of how skewed things can become when only one perspective dominates.
Yeah, Sophie found practical value in Aristotle, tidying her room.
Yes, it's a lovely touch. After reading about his logic and classification, she feels inspired to organize her things, even her thoughts, putting her philosophical ideas on the top shelf. She starts seeing her pets through his categories, their form, their potential, their abilities. It shows how even ancient philosophy can offer tools for understanding and ordering our own lives. Okay, so after the big three, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Greek philosophy, didn't just stop, right? We enter the Hellenistic period. What characterized this era?
Well, Hellenism, roughly from Alexander the Great's death in 323 BC until the Roman consolidation around 30 BC, and even extending into the Roman Empire period, was a time of huge cultural mixing. Greek culture spread far and wide, blending with Egyptian, Persian, Jewish, and other traditions.
Syncretism, right? The merging of different beliefs.
Exactly. You saw gods and philosophies blending together across the Mediterranean world. But it was also a period of uncertainty for many. Old city-states were declining, empires rose and fell. There was a sense of cultural dissolution and pessimism, as the book puts it.
So philosophy changed its focus.
It became much more personal, more practical. The big question shifted from what is the nature of reality to how can I live a good, happy, tranquil life in this confusing, often scary world? Ethics became central. How do you find inner peace? Several major schools offered answers.
Like the Cynics. Yes, founded by Antisthenes, who was actually a student of Socrates. Their core idea, echoing Socrates' famous, "what a lot of things I don't need," was that true happiness comes from radical independence from external things, wealth, fame, power, even health.
Because those things can be lost.
Precisely. They're unreliable. True happiness, for the cynics like Diogenes living in his barrel, was found in self-sufficiency, virtue, living according to nature, and rejecting societal conventions. It was within everyone's reach and couldn't be taken away.
Okay, then the Stoics, they were quite influential, weren't they?
Hugely influential, especially later in Rome, with figures like Seneca, Epictetus, and Emperor Marcus Aurelius, founded by Zeno around 300 BC. They believed in a universal reason, a logos, that governs the cosmos, an idea borrowed from Heraclitus.
And humans are part of this cosmic reason.
Yes, each person is a microcosmos reflecting the macrocosmos. This led them to the idea of natural law, a universal moral law based on reason, applying to everyone, everywhere, regardless of social status. Even slaves were seen as part of this universal brotherhood.
That's quite progressive.
Very. They were also monists, believing in one unified reality, no sharp split between spirit and matter like Plato. And they were quite cosmopolitan, open to different cultures, and involved in public life. Their emphasis on duty, rationality, accepting what you can't control, and focusing on virtue had a massive impact. Seneca's line, "To mankind, mankind is holy," really captures their humanistic spirit.
And the Epicureans, often misunderstood as just pleasure seekers.
Right, often caricatured. Epicurus, also around 300 BC, did teach that pleasure is the highest good. But he wasn't talking about wild partying. It was about achieving ataraxia, a state of serene tranquility, freedom from fear and pain.
How did they achieve that?
By carefully weighing pleasures. Is the short-term gain worth the long-term pain? Like that chocolate binge example, feels good now, maybe not so good later. Epicurean pleasure included friendship, learning, art, the higher, more enduring pleasures. It required self-control, moderation, and importantly, overcoming the fear of death.
How did they tackle the fear of death?
By adopting Democritus's atomism. If the soul is just atoms, then when you die, the atoms disperse. There's no consciousness left to suffer or worry. So death is nothing to us. Focus on living well now.
So these schools offered practical paths to happiness, but there was also a more mystical strand emerging, Neoplatonism.
Yes, particularly with Plotinus in the 3rd century AD. He revived and reinterpreted Plato, but with a much stronger mystical bent. He kept Plato's dualism, the separation of soul and body, the higher world of forms, or the one, versus the lower material world.
How did he describe reality?
He saw the world spanning between two poles. At the top, the divine light, the one or God, pure being. At the bottom, absolute darkness, which isn't really a thing, just the complete absence of light and non-being. Everything exists somewhere on this spectrum.
Like a light beam getting dimmer.
Exactly. The divine light flows down, illuminating everything, even nature, but it gets weaker the further it is from the source. Our souls, Plotinus believed, are sparks from that fire, originating from the one and yearning to return.
And this leads to mystical experiences.
It provides a framework for them. Mysticism is about experiencing a direct union, a fusion, with that ultimate reality, God, the one, the cosmic spirit. It's often described as losing oneself, like a drop of water merging into the ocean.
We see similar descriptions across different cultures, right?
Remarkably similar. Whether it's Indian mystics, Christian mystics like Angelus Silesius or Sufis, the path often involves simplifying life, meditation, purification. But interpretations differ. Western mysticism often retains a personal God distinct from creation, focusing on redemption. Eastern traditions often speak of total absorption, realizing the divine is everything, seeking release from cycles of rebirth.
And Sophie has a moment like this?
She does, a profound, almost overwhelming experience where the world feels like a single living entity, her own eye. She feels merged with everything, enormous, like that drop of color tinting the whole jug of water. It leaves her wondering if she really is divine, a spark from the source, a truly mystical insight sparked by her philosophical journey.
Incredible. So philosophy wasn't just abstract thought, it deeply touched on these ultimate experiences. Let's move now into the Middle Ages. How did philosophy fare when Christianity became dominant?
Well, the Middle Ages, roughly 400 to 1400 AD, often get a bad rap as the Dark Ages, but that's really unfair. As 1,000 years of germination and growth, the Roman Empire split, giving rise to the Latin Christian West, the Greek Christian Byzantine East, and crucially, the Arab world, which preserved and advanced so much Greek science and philosophy, especially in math, astronomy, medicine.
So learning didn't just stop.
Not at all. This period saw the development of the school system, from monasteries to cathedral schools, and eventually the first universities around 1200 AD, with faculties for different subjects. Modern nations, cities, citizenship, folk culture all have deep roots here, and Christianity became the unifying framework for almost everything, including philosophy.
How did philosophers work within that framework? St. Augustine is a huge figure, right?
Yeah, immense. Augustine, 354 to 430 AD, essentially Christianized Plato. He saw deep parallels between Platonic ideas and Christian doctrine. Plato's eternal forms became eternal ideas in the mind of God. He believed Plato must have somehow known the Old Testament, though that's unlikely.
Did he think reason alone was enough?
No, that's key. While appreciating reason, Augustine stressed its limits regarding faith. Christianity involved divine mysteries, accessible ultimately only through faith in God's grace, God illuminating the soul. He also leaned heavily towards predestination, the idea that God has already chosen who will be saved, based on St. Paul. He saw history itself as a divinely guided struggle between the city of God and the city of man, a linear path towards God's kingdom.
Okay, so Augustine brings Plato into Christianity. What about Aristotle? He was largely lost to the West for a while, wasn't he?
He was, but he was preserved and studied intensely in the Arab world. Then, in the High Middle Ages, his works were reintroduced to Europe, translated from Arabic and Greek, causing a huge intellectual ferment. And the figure who reconciled Aristotle with Christianity was St. Thomas Aquinas.
Aquinas, 1225-1274. What was his approach?
Aquinas did for Aristotle what Augustine did for Plato. He masterfully synthesized Aristotelian philosophy with Christian theology, arguing there was no fundamental conflict between faith and reason. They were two harmonious paths to truth.
Two paths. How so?
He believed some truths, like the existence of God, could be reached through both natural reason, observing the world using logic like Aristotle's arguments for a first mover, and through faith and revelation, the Bible. Faith was the surer path, covering mysteries reason couldn't grasp, but reason could take you a long way. He used the analogy of knowing God through his creation, like seeing his love for flowers, versus knowing God through the Bible, his autobiography.
Did Aquinas share Aristotle's problematic views on women?
Unfortunately, yes. He largely adopted Aristotle's view of women as biologically inferior or misbegotten males, though he affirmed the equality of their souls before God, especially in the afterlife. It perpetuated that imbalance we discussed earlier.
So, the Middle Ages integrated faith and reason, largely through Plato and Aristotle, but then comes the Renaissance, a massive shift.
A true rebirth, starting in Italy around the 14th century. It was a rediscovery of classical art, literature, and philosophy, but also much more. It fostered Renaissance humanism, a powerful focus on human potential, dignity, and achievement. Man, not just God, became the measure of all things.
Individualism became key. The Renaissance man.
Absolutely. An explosion of creativity, genius, and the ideal of being skilled in everything. There was a new fascination with the human body dissection for art and science, the return of the nude in painting and sculpture after centuries, a new confidence in human capabilities.
And this was fueled by new inventions.
Critically, the compass opened up the age of exploration, firearms changed warfare and power dynamics. The printing press was revolutionary, spreading ideas far beyond the church's control, democratizing knowledge. And later, the telescope would shatter old views of the cosmos.
This all led to a new way of thinking, the scientific method.
Yes, the empirical method. A move away from relying solely on ancient authorities or pure reason. The new emphasis was on observation, experience, and experiment. Measure what can be measured, and make measurable what cannot. This systematic testing of ideas against reality was fundamentally new. Man wasn't just observing nature, he was intervening, experimenting, trying to control it. Shakespeare's "What a piece of work is man" captures that spirit of human ingenuity.
And this new method fueled the scientific revolution, Copernicus challenging the Earth-centered universe.
Precisely. Copernicus, publishing in 1543, proposed the heliocentric model Earth orbits the sun. It was simpler, explained observations better, still thought orbits were circular and the sun was the center of everything, but it was a radical shift.
Then Galileo pushed it further with observation and experiment.
Galileo, 1564-1642, was crucial. He used the telescope to gather evidence supporting Copernicus. He formulated the law of inertia, things keep moving unless stopped, which explained why we don't fly off a moving Earth. He did systematic experiments, rolling balls down inclines, measuring motion. He embodied the new hands-on approach.
And Isaac Newton tied it all together.
Newton, 1642-1727, provided the grand synthesis. Building on Galileo and Kepler, who figured out planets move in ellipses. Newton showed that the same few physical laws like gravity and inertia govern both the heavens and the earth. His laws explained falling apples and orbiting planets. It was a unified mechanical view of the universe, ending the old distinction between earthly imperfection and heavenly perfection.
How did people react to this, losing our special place at the center?
It was profound, unsettling for many, a great burden, as the book says, similar to the later impact of Darwin. If Earth isn't the center, are humans still special? But it also opened up new perspectives. Maybe every point, every person could be seen as a center in this vast, law-governed cosmos.
And happening alongside all this science was the Reformation. Martin Luther.
Yes, roughly concurrently. Luther, 1483 to 1546, emphasized the individual's direct relationship with God, cutting out the church hierarchy, scripture alone. His translation of the Bible into German was hugely important for both religion and language.
Was he a Renaissance figure?
In some ways, the individualism, the focus on vernacular language, but his view of humanity was much bleaker than many Renaissance humanists like Erasmus. Luther stressed human depravity after the fall, salvation by grace alone, not reason or works. So, a complex relationship.
Okay, this sets the stage for the next major phase, the Age of Reason, the Enlightenment, and its consequences. Where does Descartes fit in?
René Descartes, 1596-1650, is often called the father of modern philosophy, a key figure in rationalism. He was deeply impressed by the certainty of mathematics and the new physics, and he wanted to find a similarly certain method for philosophy. He was grappling with that mind-body problem. How does conscious thought relate to the physical, mechanical world?
What was his method?
Radical doubt. Except nothing is true unless it's absolutely clear and distinct to the mind. Break problems down. Build knowledge step by step from simple truths. Be systematic. Famously, the only thing he couldn't doubt was that he was doubting, which meant he was thinking, which meant he must exist. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am.
And he believed some ideas were innate, born with them.
Yes, like the idea of God, a perfect being. He argued the idea of perfection itself implies existence, because non-existence would be an imperfection, a rational proof for God starting from the mind.
And this is where the Sophie story gets really clever with the meta-narrative. Layla the computer, Major Nag.
Exactly. Alberto introduces this computer program, Layla, that knows uncanny details about Sophie. It freaks her out, naturally, raising questions about determinism. Then Alberto drops the bombshell. Maybe they are just characters in a book the Major is writing for his daughter, Hilda.
Making their whole reality suspect, just like Descartes questioned his senses.
Precisely. Are they real? Do they have free will? Or are they just puppets in the Major's story? It's Cartesian doubt made incredibly personal and dramatic. Alberto even plans to find elbow room for initiative, to resist being mere inventions. It vividly illustrates the philosophical struggle for certainty and agency.
Wow. Okay, after Descartes, Spinoza. He sounds quite different.
Baruch Spinoza, 1632 to 1677, a Dutch Jewish philosopher, was very radical. He got excommunicated for his views. He criticized established religion, arguing for a historico-critical reading of the Bible, seeing it as a human document, not literally God's every word. He thought Jesus taught a universal religion of reason based on love.
And his view of God was unusual.
Pantheism. God is everything, not a creator outside the world, but the world itself, the single substance of reality. God, or nature, as he put it, everything rocks. Thoughts, stars, is just a mode or expression of this one divine substance.
So no free will in the usual sense.
Pretty much determinism. Everything happens according to the necessary laws of God nature. Humans act according to their nature and circumstances, like an apple tree produces apples. Freedom, for Spinoza, wasn't arbitrary choice, but understanding and living in harmony with this necessity.
Then shifting to Britain, John Locke, empiricism again.
Right, Locke, 1632 to 1704, is hugely important for empiricism. His big questions in Essay Concerning Human Understanding. Where do ideas come from? Can we trust our senses?
And his answer to the first one, no innate ideas.
None at all. The mind at birth is a tabula rasa, a blank slate. All ideas come from experience, either sensation, input from the senses, or reflection. The mind processing those inputs, thinking, combining, abstracting. Simple ideas, like yellow, hard, combine to form complex ideas, like lemon.
But can we trust those senses completely? That yellow and hard?
Locke made a crucial distinction here. Primary qualities like size, shape, weight, motion. These exist in the objects themselves, objectively. But secondary qualities like color, sound, taste, smell, these exist only in our minds, produced by the interaction between the object and our senses. The yellowness isn't in the lemon itself in the same way its shape is.
Okay, that leads us to David Hume, the ultimate skeptic.
You could say that. Hume, 1711-1776, took empiricism to its logical and often uncomfortable conclusion. He profoundly influenced Kant. He wanted to clean up philosophy, get rid of fuzzy concepts not based on direct experience.
His test for ideas: commit it to the flames.
Pretty much. Any idea that doesn't come either from abstract reasoning concerning quantity or number, like math, or experimental reasoning concerning matter of fact, sense experience, is meaningless metaphysics. An angel, it's just a combination of human figure and wings impressions we have had separately but never combined in experience. So the complex idea angel is suspect.
And he even questioned the self, the I.
He did. That feeling of a continuous, unchanging self or ego that Descartes started with. Hume said it's an illusion. When you introspect, you only find a stream of perceptions, thoughts, feelings, sensations constantly changing. There's no single enduring self underneath. The mind is like a theater where perceptions appear and disappear.
Whoa, and cause and effect too, that cornerstone of science.
He questioned that too. We assume one billiard ball causes the other to move because we see it happen repeatedly.
Oh.
But Hume argued we never actually perceive the causal connection itself. We only observe constant conjunction. One event regularly follows another. Our belief in causality is based on habit, custom, expectation, not logical proof or direct observation.
So the sun might not rise tomorrow.
Logically speaking, based purely on past observation, we can't be 100% certain. Past performance doesn't guarantee future results, as the unfortunate chicken fed daily by the farmer eventually learns. He warned strongly against assuming causal links just because things happen together, like the black cat and the broken arm.
What about morality? If reason is limited, where does right and wrong come from?
From sentiment or feeling, not reason. Reason can tell you how to achieve a goal, but it can't tell you what goals are good. Morality stems from our feelings of sympathy, compassion, approval, or disapproval. That famous I sought gap. You can't logically derive a moral ought, we should do this, purely from a factual is, this is the case.
So saying lots of people fly doesn't automatically mean we ought to build more airports.
Exactly. You need to bring in values, feelings about the environment, quality of life, etc. Reason alone is neutral. His shocking line about preferring the world's destruction to scratching his finger highlights this. Reason itself isn't violated by such a preference. It's our sentiments that find it monstrous. Evil is a failure of feeling, not logic.
And God. Immortality.
For Hume, these are beyond reason or empirical proof. Agnosticism. They are matters of faith, totally separate from knowledge. He really severed that link.
Okay, and then Bishop Berkeley takes empiricism somewhere else entirely. Idealism.
George Berkeley, 1685-1753, an Irish bishop, pushed Locke's empiricism to an extreme logical conclusion. His famous phrase, esse est percipi, to be is to be perceived.
Meaning, if something isn't being perceived, it doesn't exist.
Pretty much. He denied the existence of mind-independent material substance. What is a table? It's just a collection of ideas, hardness, brownness, smoothness existing in a mind. If no mind perceives it, the ideas making of the table cease to exist.
But things don't just pop in and out of existence when we close our eyes.
But Berkeley had an answer. What ensures the continuity of existence? God. God is the ultimate infinite mind who is constantly perceiving everything. So the table, the tree in the forest, everything continues to exist because it exists as an idea in the mind of God.
So reality is fundamentally mental, perceived by God.
Yes. All our ideas, the entire world we experience, ultimately originates from and is sustained by God's perception. Even time and space, he argued, might just be ways our minds and God's minds structure perceptions.
And this ties directly into the Sophie's world plot twist.
Incredibly directly.
Yeah.
Alberto reveals that Major Nag, Hild's father, is the spirit or consciousness creating their reality. Sophie and Alberto are, in a sense, ideas in the Major's mind, characters in his book. Their existence is literally dependent on his perception as the author. It makes Berkeley's seemingly outlandish idealism suddenly terrifyingly relevant to their own being. It's a brilliant fusion of philosophy and narrative.
Mind-blowing. Okay, let's bring this closer to modern times. How did these ideas evolve in the 19th and 20th centuries? Kant tried to bridge the gap.
Immanuel Kant, 1724-1804, is pivotal. He read Hume and said it awoke him from his dogmatic slumber. He wanted to synthesize rationalism, like Descartes, and empiricism, like Hume. He agreed with Hume, we can't know things in themselves, noumena, only things as they appear to us, phenomena.
But he didn't think the mind was just a blank slate.
No. He argued knowledge comes from two sources working together. The material comes from our senses. Hume was right about that. But the form comes from our minds. We have innate structures, he called them categories like time, space, and causality, that actively organize the raw sense data.
So we impose order on the world.
In a way, yes. Our minds are pre-programmed to experience the world in terms of cause and effect, in spatial and temporal terms. We can't help but see the world that way. But these structures only apply to the world of experience, phenomena. When reason tries to go beyond experience, asking about God, freedom, immortality, gets tangled in contradictions, antinomies, because it has no sensory data to work with.
What about morality for Kant? Was it reason or feeling?
Definitely reason. He disagreed strongly with Hume here. He believed we have practical reason, an innate moral compass that gives us a universal moral law, the categorical imperative. Act only according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will beat it, that it should become a universal law.
Treat others as ends, not just means.
That's another formulation of it. This moral law is absolute, universal, known through conscience. And true freedom, for Kant, isn't doing whatever you want. It's choosing to follow this rational moral law, even against your inclinations. When you act morally, you are acting freely and participating, in a sense, in the reality in itself.
Powerful stuff. After Kant's complex system, we get Romanticism, a reaction.
A massive reaction against the Enlightenment's cold rationalism. Romanticism, late 18th, early 19th century, emphasized emotion, intuition, imagination, nature, the individual spirit. It was like a sigh of relief, focused on subjective experience.
Less logic, more feeling. Nature worship.
Yes, a yearning for connection with nature, seen as a living organism, not just a machine. A fascination with folk culture, myths, history, the spirit of a nation, Volksgeist. Think collecting fairy tales, Grimm, folk songs, celebrating national identity.
And that idea of life as a dream or theater.
Very prominent. Shakespeare, Calderon's Life is a Dream, a sense of the mysterious, the ephemeral, the power of imagination to shape reality, a focus on genius, originality, breaking rules. It was a deeply influential cultural shift across Europe.
Then Hegel, back to grand systems.
George W.F. Hegel, 1770-1831, tried to create the ultimate philosophical system. Hugely influential, but also provoked strong reactions later from Kierkegaard and Marx. His key idea was dialectics, reason, and history unfolding through a process of thesis, antithesis, synthesis.
Conflict driving progress.
Essentially, an idea clashes with its opposite, leading to a higher truth that incorporates both. History, for Hegel, was the unfolding of the world's spirit, Weltgeist, achieving self-consciousness through human culture, particularly in the state, art, religion, and ultimately philosophy itself. He stressed the importance of community, family, society, state, shaping the individual.
But Kierkegaard rejected this grand system.
Completely. Søren Kierkegaard, 1813-1855, the Danish thinker, is seen as the father of existentialism. He hated Hegel's abstract system. For Kierkegaard, truth was subjective, passionate, lived. What mattered was the individual's existence, their choices, their relationship with God.
Faith over reason.
Absolutely. Religion and objective knowledge were like fire and water. Faith required a leap, embracing the absurd, credo quia absurdum. He described 3 stages of life. The aesthetic, living for pleasure leads to despair. The ethical, living by moral duty and commitment. And the highest, the religious, leap of faith, personal commitment to God.
And Karl Marx, also reacting to Hegel, but very differently.
Very differently. Marx, 1818-83, took Hegel's dialectic, but applied it to material conditions, not ideas. Historical materialism. Society's economic basis, means of production, class relations, determines its superstructure, politics, law, religion, culture.
So economics drives history through class struggle.
Yes. History is the story of conflict between classes, owner versus worker, lord versus serf. Capitalism, he argued, involved the alienation of labor workers exploited, disconnected from their work and its product. He predicted capitalism's internal contradictions would lead to crisis and a revolution by the proletariat.
His ideas obviously had a massive impact.
Immense, led to revolutions, shaped political movements, improved working conditions in many places through socialist pressure. But his predictions weren't all accurate, and regimes claiming his name often led to new forms of oppression, a complex legacy.
Okay, now shifting gears completely. Charles Darwin. Biology, not philosophy.
But with profound philosophical consequences. Darwin, 1809 to 1882, through his voyage on the Beagle and meticulous observation, developed the theory of evolution by natural selection.
Building on geology, Lyell's ideas of gradual change over vast time.
Yes, that was crucial. Darwin gathered evidence from fossils, the geographic distribution of species, like those Galapagos finches with different beaks, and similarities in embryos across species.
What was a mechanism? Natural selection.
Right, inspired by artificial breeding. Nature produces variation, more offspring are born than can survive, struggle for existence. Those with traits slightly better suited to their environment are more likely to survive and reproduce, survival of the fittest. Over long periods, this leads to species changing and new species emerging.
Like the peppered moths adapting to pollution.
A classic example. Evolution isn't directed. It's about random variation and environmental pressure. He also speculated about life originating from non-life in the primal soup. It fundamentally challenged the idea of fixed species created by God and humanity's unique place.
Another blow to human specialness, like Copernicus.
Exactly, and deeply unsettling for many.
And finally, delving into the mind itself. Sigmund Freud.
Freud, 1856-1939. The founder of psychoanalysis. He explored the unconscious mind, arguing our behavior is driven by hidden desires, fears, and repressed memories, often sexual or aggressive in nature.
The id, ego, and superego.
That was his model of the psyche. The primitive id, pleasure principle, the mediating ego, reality principle, and the moralistic superego, conscience. Much of the conflict happens unconsciously.
How does the unconscious reveal itself? Slips of the tongue, dreams.
Yes, parapraxis or Freudian slips.
Oh, yeah.
Also dreams, which he saw as disguised wish fulfillments. The manifest dream content hides the latent unconscious thoughts. Psychoanalysis aimed to bring this unconscious material into consciousness to resolve conflicts. He also talked about defense mechanisms like repression, projection, rationalization.
And this influenced art. Surrealism.
Greatly, surrealists tried to tap directly into the unconscious through automatic writing and dream imagery. Freud's ideas about the power of the hidden mind, creativity springing from lifting repression, were hugely influential across culture, not just psychology.
And again, the Sophie's World meta-narrative uses this. Alberto's escape plan.
Yes. Alberto explicitly uses Freudian terms, seeing their reality as the major's dream, and planning to escape by understanding the latent meaning, manipulating the author's unconscious, essentially. Finding freedom by becoming aware of the forces controlling them.
Okay, so bringing it all together into the 20th century and beyond, existentialism builds on Kierkegaard.
Very much so, especially Sartre, 1905-1980. Existence precedes essence. We're born without a fixed nature, radically free, and condemned to create our own meaning through choices. Huge emphasis on responsibility, anguish, freedom. Simone de Beauvoir applied this powerfully to feminism in The Second Sex, arguing woman is a social construct, not a fixed essence.
And the theater of the absurd reflected the sense of meaninglessness.
Yes. Playwrights like Beckett and Ionesco used absurdity and non-realistic techniques to show the lack of inherent meaning, hoping to jolt audiences into seeking more authentic lives.
We also saw eco-philosophy emerge, concerns about the environment.
Arne Naess and others argued the environmental crisis stems from fundamental flaws in Western thinking, a need for a deeper ecological consciousness, not just technical fixes.
And a rise in New Age beliefs, filling a vacuum.
Perhaps. As a traditional religion declined for some, alternative spiritualities, mysticism, sometimes pseudoscience, flourished. A search for meaning in a complex, often disenchanted world. Some of it, as the book notes, relies on seeing patterns in coincidence, like that lottery where you only see the winners.
Finally, cosmology, the Big Bang.
Our scientific understanding of the universe's origin, a massive expansion from an incredibly dense state billions of years ago. Looking at distant galaxies is looking back in time. The universe might expand forever or collapse back. And the humbling realization, we were made of stardust, elements forged in long-dead stars.
Which still leaves the ultimate question, why is there anything at all?
Exactly. Even knowing the scientific story, the fundamental mystery of existence remains. Why this universe? Why consciousness? Why anything rather than nothing?
And for Sophie and Alberto, the mystery becomes, are we anything? Their final realization is that they are characters in the Major's book for Hild.
The ultimate meta twist.
Yeah.
Their reality is a fiction. Hild reads about them, experiences their storm, interacts with their world in subtle ways, blurring the lines.
And their escape attempt at the garden party is their final act of defiance, trying to break free from the author's control.
It's their attempt to seize agency, to become more than just words on a page, to sneak out of the consciousness that created them. A philosophical concept made into a narrative climax.
So what an incredible journey Through millennia of thought, all wrapped in this nested mystery about the nature of reality itself, from ancient wonder to quantum physics, and the idea that maybe we're all just part of some larger story.
It really emphasizes that the core questions haven't changed that much. Who are we? Where did this all come from? What does it mean? Even if reality is a dream, a story, a simulation, the act of asking, of seeking understanding, seems to be the crucial human endeavor.
So, the final thought for you, our listeners. If the universe is this ongoing, unfolding story, this grand cosmic narrative, what role are you playing? If knowledge is a process, how are you shaping your own understanding, writing your own chapter in this deep dive we call existence? Keep questioning, keep wondering.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to ReadersPair, where two readers bring you one book and endless insights. See you in the next chapter.